where I grew up in the western plains of Kansas, they have both cows and buffalo. And even though I've heard, and they're quite different from each other, even though I've heard more people in America die from a cow than they do from sharks. I guess there's a lot of farmers getting kicked in the head or something, Harry. Watch out, you're accident prone. But buffalo are way more dangerous though. They can knock your car over without even trying. We had buffalo in my hometown, and every year some drunk college student would try to run through their pen and end up getting mauled or gored, or they could take your head off without even trying. They don't taste as good as cow, but they are more dangerous. And a recent thing I learned about cows and buffalo, if a storm is coming in, what does a cow do when the storm comes? They'll circle up, they'll try to huddle, they might try to find shelter from the wind, they'll try to get away from it. But a buffalo doesn't. Do you know this? Buffalo, God just put it inside them. Buffalo run towards the storm. God somehow put it in them. They know instinctively if they go towards the storm, they'll get through it faster than if they try to walk away from the storm. The storm will catch up with them and they'll be stuck in the storm. Well, we're facing a storm societally, generationally, spiritually, converging upon us at this point in history. And we could be a cow or we could be a buffalo. And I know that you're feeling the raindrops, you're hearing the lightning strike, and the showers might be different in your life than in the person's next to you, but it's all the same storm. And it's growing, it's approaching, it's gaining power. And if I were to use kind of just a Doppler observation of what this storm cell looks like, I think I could describe it in a way that you will recognize. You see it in your family, you'll see it in society around us. Maybe I would imagine you're experiencing it in some way. This is a unique time in history. And only after we experience it, I think we're going to be able to see it with clarity. But right now, I look around and experience and see and hear from people around me this storm that we're facing, that is racing from the horizon, so to speak, is marked by a social dissettledness. It marked also a fear of change, but change happening nonetheless, and then maybe a desperate longing for a different kind of change. This storm is marked by family disunity. This storm is marked by extreme tribalism, where there's insiders and there's outsiders. And if you're an outsider, I'm going to vilify you. And you will receive the blame of everything going on if you're not in my tribe. There's anger, there's hurting, there's blaming, there's isolationism, escapism, hedonism. This storm is marked by doubt, more doubt than I've ever seen. People asking questions like, do I really believe this faith? Is this really mine or not? Is this occupation what I really should be doing with my life? Do I really love my spouse or not? Have I done a good job? Have I spent my life well? Am I supposed to even be a parent? Did I miss my calling? These are just some of the observations about this storm, and it is brewing, not on the horizon, but in our hearts. Our heart marks the center of this storm cell. Our heart is the battleground. Our heart is the crossroads. Proverbs 4:23 says, from the heart springs the issues of life. Or flowing out of your heart are all the issues of life. So the heart is where we need to face. And let's be the buffalo. Let's run into this storm and charge it, and we're going to get wet, we're going to get cold, we might get singed by lightning here or there, but it's better than huddling up. Let's take our hearts head on. Let's risk some exposure, but come out on the other side of this storm whenever it ceases. If we do this right, if we examine our hearts, we're going to come out on the other side stronger, healthier, biblically equipped, and honoring to God. So that's why I want to do this 4-week series on the heart. And we're going to have 4 stops. This Sunday we're in Jeremiah chapter 17. Next week we're going to be in Proverbs. Week after that we're going to be in Ephesians. Week after that we're going to be in 1 John. So we're getting a good broad scope of what the Bible has to say about your heart. And I should say to any honest preacher, and I may not be a lot of things, but I am honest. Any honest preacher will admit that the one who preaches the sermon is kind of like the pilot, in that, I'm directing where the sermon goes, but I'm a passenger as well. I'm on the plane. I'm as much riding that plane as you are. And so this is going to be a challenging series for me as well, as I learn what God is trying to tell me about my heart. And I pray that you take that same position as you seek the Lord and what He has to tell you about your heart. So let's take this first stop in Jeremiah chapter 17. We're going to start in verse 9. And the title of this sermon is Know Your Heart. Know your heart. We need to know what we're dealing with. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it?" The first thing you need to know about your heart is deceitful. Your heart is deceitful. It's crooked and uneven like a bad road, guaranteed to mislead you down a faulty avenue. Jiminy Cricket got it wrong, Pinocchio. Don't trust your heart. Your heart is not a good guide. It's not going to make all your dreams come true. Your heart's natural desires and dreams are false. It's not trustworthy. It says the heart is deceitful above all things. That tells me of all the things that the heart can be, of all the things that your heart has the potential to be, and of all the things that your heart sometimes is, more than anything else, it's unmatched in its deception. Your heart can be sweet as pie sometimes. Other times it can be empathetic. At times your heart is sober and alert. It's often loving and kind. But above all things that your heart is, it is deceptive. You can't trust it. Always deceiving, trying to deceive others, attempting to deceive God. But maybe more than anything else, deceiving self. Self-deception of the heart. If you look back at verse 5, it says, "Thus says the Lord, cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength, whose heart turns away from the Lord." Even if you're the man that you're trusting in, even if your strength is the one that maybe you're not trusting in anyone else's strength but your own, you're cursed. Your heart is turning away from the Lord. Matthew Henry has a great commentary on the whole Bible, and it's free. You can get it online if you want. As I was studying this passage out, he had a great footnote in here about this verse. He says, "It is folly to trust in man, for he is not only frail, but false and deceitful. We are apt to think that we trust in God and are therefore entitled to the blessings promised to those who do so. But this is a thing about which our own heart deceives us as much as anything. We think that we trust in God, when really we do not. This is evidenced by our hopes and fears rising or falling with that which gives us either a smile or a frown." Our heart is deceptive. And if all we do is just look inwardly at our heart and try to figure out what we're thinking and feeling, we're going to be led astray. Our hearts are like my dog Penelope. We come home and I come home and the kids come up and they greet me and they tell me stuff, what happened in their day. And my dog only has my dog always just brings her bed. That's it. And you can tell, I just look at her and I think she's so anxious to tell me something. She's trying to communicate to me, but she doesn't know how. All she has is this bed. One time I had a dream that Penelope could talk, and we were all disappointed because she turned out to be really dumb. But you can tell she's trying to communicate, but all she has is this bed. That's it. That's all she can communicate. And I think she's trying to tell me about her day. Your heart is the exact same way. Your heart wants to communicate things, but it's limited in its bandwidth, and we experience all kinds of emotions. And we need to know our hearts because it's so deceptive. We can't trust the emotions coming out of it. It's not going to lead us in a good place. It's not going to direct us or instruct us. The heart is deceptive. We are not aware of just how deceptive it is. We do not suspect it. It's subtle in its falseness. Matthew Henry goes on to convey in some sense how your heart whispers to you. God does not see what you're doing. God does not require. And then we just peacefully continue in our sin. And in that way and in 1,000 others, your heart deceives you. It cheats you into the ruin of unintended consequences. And in that way, your self-deceiving heart is also a self-destroying heart. And what does the verse say? It says, who can know it? The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? This feels so hopeless. What hope have we then if the inner lamp casts false light? If the deputy of your soul betrays even itself? But it gets worse. Not only is your heart deceitful, your heart is desperate. Look at the verse again. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperate, desperately sick to be precise. The King James says desperately wicked. The NIV translates it, the heart is beyond cure. And I think that's actually the most precise translation. The idea of incurability is being conveyed. If you turn back just to chapter 15 and verse 18, it says, why is my pain unceasing and my wound incurable? That's the exact same word that's used in our text. My wound is incurable, refusing to be healed. Our heart is desperate. It's sick. It's beyond cure. And men and women with desperate hearts do desperate things. What have you done when you're desperate? It's a silly illustration, but I've shared it before. I'm most desperate when I'm hungry. I love food, and you've heard of my pitfalls with things that I eat. So I've eaten 2 of those dehydration packets at 2 different times out of the beef jerky accidentally. My latest food faux pas, there was some meat in the fridge, and I didn't know what it was. That's never a good sign if you're not sure what it is. It'd been in there for a while. So I was like, we need to clean this out. And so I started eating the meat, and it was good. I enjoyed it. But Rachel came in eventually and decided the meat was unfit for human consumption, so she gave it to the dog. And the dog promptly went in the other room and vomited on the carpet. So on the one hand, my stomach has a stronger constitution than a dog, but I'm worried about my taste buds because what if I consume something poisonous? My taste buds should alert me. But when you're desperate, you eat things that maybe you shouldn't eat. You get hungry, you do stupid things. And brothers and sisters, your heart is desperate. It's desperate. And if it is not deeply contented in the proper pleasures, it will seek satisfaction in sin because it's desperate. It's deceiving. And these 3 elements, self-deception, illness, incurability of the heart, these taken together, these form the theological concept of depravity. Depravity. You need to know your heart. You know, when I was first thinking about this was God first kind of laid it on my spirit, like we need to go somewhere with this concept. I thought of this verse, but I wasn't sure where it was, so I went to Google it. And so I was typing in the heart is wicked, and I got the heart is, and I typed the W, and Google filled in well. And I'm like, no, that is the opposite. The heart is not well. It's deceitful. It's desperate. It's sick. It's incurable. But all is not lost. God comes to the rescue. We see it in verse 10. Not only is your heart deceptive, not only is it desperate, but your heart is discernible. And that's why I've entitled this sermon, Know Your Heart. Verse 10 kind of gives the answer to verse 9. Verse 9 says it's deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. Your heart is known. It's known by God. God is the one that designed the human heart. And then God went on to create the human heart. God was there. He observed the original fall of the human heart, and even now He sees it so much more clearly than even you see your own heart. He is not susceptible to obfuscation. Nothing is a mystery to him. He knows your heart. Think about who knows you best. God knows you better. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 13. Hebrews 4 verse 13 says that there is nothing in all creation that is hidden from His sight. Everything is exposed and laid bare before the eyes of Him to whom we must give an account. God knows your heart. Revelation chapter 1:14, the image of Christ. You remember how it describes Him in different ways, but it describes His eyes as being a flame of fire. I think of piercing eyes. You stand before Christ, you will feel exposed because He doesn't fall for any of your tricks. He looks through everything. He sees right to the intent of your heart. Even when you can't pinpoint it and put your finger on it, He sees it. He knows it. Your heart is known by God. Not only that, but your heart is known through testing. This whole passage, it's very interesting. Verse 5 says, "Cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength, whose heart turns away from the Lord." So we're starting with that concept of heart, and then down in verse 9 and 10, we're ending with the concept of heart. But in between verses 5 and 10, we see a testing going on. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 3. That'd be a good verse to reference to write down, a good verse to memorize. Proverbs 17, verse 3. "The crucible is for silver, the furnace is for gold, but the Lord tests the hearts." The crucible is for silver, the furnace is for gold, but the Lord tests the hearts. So your heart is discernible by God through testing. And let's look at, in your notes, we've got a picture of, I'm going to switch Bibles because I got my interleaf here and I got notes in it that I can follow a little more closely. In these verses, on your notes, can we put up that the next slide there? Yeah, okay. So you've got this little diagram in your notes, and maybe we can fill this out together. All right, so we've got, that's the sun above and then the two trees below it. This is the scenario that we have in verses 5 through 10. Let's go ahead and read it real quickly. "Thus says the Lord, cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength, whose heart turns away from the Lord. He is like a shrub in the desert. He shall not see any good come. He shall dwell in the parched places of the wilderness, in uninhabited salt land. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the hearts and test the mind to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds." So let's fill this diagram out. I'm a pretty visual guy. So first, we got a tree and a shrub. So let's put some leaves on that tree. And then the shrub is parched. So let's make it a scraggly branch. There we go. Little tree trivia for you, real quick though. What tree, just as a little mental break here, what tree produces the necessary oil to make real root beer? Does anyone know? The oil was determined to be carcinogenic in 1979. So anyone my age and younger has never got to taste real root beer because it comes from the tree of sassafras tree. That's right. Anyway, nothing to do with the sermon, but we got two trees. One of them is big and fruitful, and one of them is small and scraggly. The text describes the one as a tree, the other one as a shrub. And it goes on to identify the tree as blessed, if you want to label the tree blessed, and the shrub as cursed. Now, why is one of them blessed and one of them cursed? Oh, and let's observe what makes them blessed and cursed. So some descriptor words. In verse 6, the cursed shrub says, it shall not see any good to come. So it has no hope. We want to make a little list here. The shrub has no hope. He shall dwell in parched places, no refreshment. Just compare this list to your life. Does it describe your life or not? No hope, no refreshment. It says, he shall dwell in parched places of the wilderness, in an uninhabited salt land. So it's wilderness, it's uninhabited, so no companionship. No hope, no refreshment, no companionship, no productivity. It's a salt land. Nothing should grow from there. You remember in the old days, in the ancient days, when they would destroy a place, they would sow all the fields with salt so nothing would grow. So does that describe your life? Are you living the shrub, cursed life? No hope, no refreshment, no companionship, no productivity? Or are you living the blessed life, the life of the tree? This has a list of no's as well. It says it does not fear in verse 8. So there's no fear. It says its leaves remain green. So there's no lack. No fear, no lack, no anxiety. It is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit. So it's always bearing fruit, even in drought. So there's no futility. Which one describes your life most? No hope, no refreshment, no companionship, no productivity, or no fear, no lack, no anxiety, no futility. Now, why are they different? Notice it's the same sun. Draw a big old gnarly sunbeams coming off that sun. And the sun is, can we go to the next slide, D? They're under the same circumstances. They're under the same sun. Because the cursed tree is in a parched place in the wilderness, but also the tree is in a year of drought. And the heat comes. So it's the same sun, the same circumstances, yet one is cursed and one is blessed. Why is that? Remember what this passage's book ended with. It's the heart. It's the heart. Both of these trees have rooted themselves in a different kind of heart. Rachel, hand me my coffee cup, please. I'm sure you've heard this illustration before, but it's helpful. Okay, so if I were to take the lid off my coffee cup and give it a really good shake, what's going to happen? Someone tell me. If I take the lid off and I shake it, what happens? What's that? It's going to spill out. What are the odds of me shaking this, and milk spilling out? What's the percent? 0, right? Why? Because there's coffee in the cup. So the shaking is going to happen, and coffee is going to come out. Not milk, not orange juice, not water, coffee. And when the circumstances of life shake us up, whatever comes out is communicating to us what's in the heart. Jesus said this. Where he said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. He was speaking to the Pharisees who behaved one way but claimed they lived another way. He said a good tree can't bear bad fruit and a bad tree can't bear good fruit. The heart reveals. The circumstances that you are in will reveal to you what is going on in your heart. It's the testing. It says in verse 9, the testing and the searching. Next slide, please. The searching and the testing are these fiery circumstances that we're exposed to in our life. It reveals what's in our heart. And if our hearts are barren and parched, we will bear no fruit. But if our hearts are rooted in the right thing and in Christ, then they will bear fruit and we will be blessed. So God knows your heart, and He knows it through testing. But thirdly, I want us to observe, your heart is discernible by God through testing for you. For you. The testing is not for His discovery. It's for your discovery. If God did not graciously afflict us with this searching, scorching sun, we would have no chance of discovering the true condition of our heart. So we've got to look at how we respond in times of difficulty. How do we respond? Think about it this way. As you just objectively evaluate your behavior, okay? How do you respond when you don't get your way? How do you respond when you are confronted with sin in your life? How do you respond when circumstances are different than your expectations? What do you do? Remember what this passage says. It talks about in verse 7, blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. So that's amplification. I'm not just trusting God. God is my trust. Everything. So how do you respond when the heat comes? God is revealing something to you, about you. On this first stop in our journey of our hearts, we must know our hearts. We must listen to God because He knows it best. We must apply His biblical rubric to our experience, and then and only then can we truly know our heart. So don't listen to your emotions. They're important. They're good. We have some commands in Scripture about how to emotionally behave. I'm not discounting emotions, but they don't guide you. This book is the guide. This book is God's view of your heart. And He puts us through difficult circumstances. He tests us so that He can reveal to us what's going on in our heart. So let's charge into this storm together. Are you guys with me? Let's do this in the next 3 weeks. Let's really humble ourselves before the Lord. Be honest with ourselves about what's going on in our heart and seek Him that He may show us, first of all, what's going on in our heart, and then He can guide our hearts. One important thing to put on your diagram. Daniel, can you put that last? Yeah, so this is, it says, again, look at verse 8. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and is not anxious in the year of drought. We're heading into a year of drought, brothers and sisters. But it does not cease to bear fruit. The tree is planted. It didn't just happen to grow there. It's planted there. God has a purpose. God has a plan. And we must water our souls with the word of Christ. And that's what this last song is about. So let's stand and sing that. So verse 9 tells us that our hearts are incurable and wicked, but don't fail to footnote the same chapter, verse 14. Heal me, O Lord, and I shall be healed. Save me, and I shall be saved, for you are my praise. You are loved.